better one, inshallah, to prepare for tomorrow, Yom Jum'ah. The potential reappearance of our awaited Saviour, Qa'im bin Ali Muhammad, Ajwallah Ta'ala Faraj Sharif. And if tomorrow is deemed to be the day, then this is a preparation for our souls, such that He may look upon us favourably and choose us to be amongst His Ansar and His supporters, inshallah. So if you can, we try and switch off, we try and reflect, we try and dig deep, and we try and do muhasibah and muraqabah of our soul. We try and do account for our deeds in this last week to see whether we've gone closer to Allah or away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we've slipped up, then we ask this merciful, this great and merciful and loving Creator, but also just Creator, to inshallah forgive us along the way for what we've done. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء يا بنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء يا اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العسى. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي
جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم واسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته وكم من فادح من البلايا قلته وكم من عثار وقيته وكم من مكروه دفعته وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم أعظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنذر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي جريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترز فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك وخالفت بعد أوامرك فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك وألزمني حكمك وبلاك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري وفكني من شد وفاقي يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي هب لي لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لساني من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من آويت أو تسلم إلى الملاء من كفيته ورحمت وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت عظمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مادحا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الذن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفور يصير بقاء قصير مدته فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل الوقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين يا إلهي يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تزجر زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رب، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتبه منها فتتركه فيها، هيهات ما بالك الذن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من علي جريتها، انسحب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملته كتمته وأعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثبات الكرام كاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك خفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك ربي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي. Everyone together. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي يا رب. Everyone together. يا ربي أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، طوع على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخصهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك، وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لسانك بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقل لي عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة، فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي، يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره الشفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل لي ما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد، وعجل فرجهم من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. We've mentioned this before, that as the Hussainiyun, as the followers of Abi Abdullah Hussain alayhi salam, and given that we have the teachings from our Holy Prophet that the salawat is a blessing for us to do, it is something critical for us to do, and it brings value to our souls, inshallah. When we do our salawat, we do it not out of stinginess, but out of love and mercy for Ali Muhammad, and therefore, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، خاتم النبيين، سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم مصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين والمظلومين، واللعنة الله على أعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. وصلى الله عليه يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب العصر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. A pleasure to be with you again, and forgive me for my absence last week, but I learned that you had a very useful session with our dear brother Zaki on Dua-E-Kumayl, so inshallah that was beneficial for you, and you had a bit of a break from this monotonous voice. If you feel that I'm a little bit out of energy today, please forgive me again. I'm asking a lot for your forgiveness in these last few weeks, so please forgive me, and inshallah we can get through this journey together. Just as a quick recap, does anyone remember, just to assess where we've got to, does anyone remember which usul we were speaking of? Say again? I said so. Thank you. So we know that means we're in a good place. I'm not going to recap everything that we discussed, but what I will just briefly say as a small recap is our last session, not last week but the week before, was a tricky one but a critical one. And we said that this was a session that if we're able to understand and jump over the fence, like we said with Tawheed, if we get to the point of unlimited with Tawheed, and similarly in Adala, if we start to understand that this concept of evil is a false concept, and we start to see things through a different lens, and we start to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's Adala truly, it's a huge step towards understanding Adala, and it's a huge step towards being very, very comfortable with our usul, and inshallah adding extra layers to this foundation within our faith. And simply put, I guess, we said evil is the absence of goodness, and evil comes about typically through our neglect, through our want to impose evil upon the world, or to put negativity amongst the world. And the source of this absence is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He has no need to want to be evil, He has no need to have an ego, etc., etc. And we eventually realized this point that, okay, well, now we've understood that it's kind of humans' interactions that is causing this absence of goodness, and it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives us this goodness in the first place, and therefore we appreciate it. How is it that we can go on this journey and therefore fall into this issue of, well, should I even bother in a given scenario? Do I even have a choice in life? If everything's going to be so bad for me, if I'm going to be in such a difficult position, do I even have a choice? Can I do anything about it? Or is this all pre-written, and is this all just going to happen to me? And therefore we believe in this concept that Allah knows everything, He knows exactly what I'm going to do, He controls everything that I do, and, well, I should just give up. Or is there something about man's free will, about man's ability to be able to make decisions and to try and correct the wrongs in life and journey towards perfection? And we said we were going to discuss this by looking at this debate that I guess is going on in the world between the concept of free will and that of determinism and predestination, where we mentioned I think 2 weeks ago in your question as well. So inshallah that's the journey we're going to go on. This is a question and a point that is directly related to Adala. Because if we believe that we have no choice in this life, and that everything that's happened is happening to us and we just have to sit back and accept it because it's all pre-planned, then the Adala of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes into question. Because if we have no choice, and if everything's going to happen to us, then why is it that we'd be judged on our actions? Surely, if we're going to be judged on our actions, we should have some influence over our actions. Otherwise, it's an unfair game, if you like. It's an unfair context. So we're going to look at the argument of what we call the fatalists. So these are those who believe in predestination. These are those who believe that you have no influence. Everything that is going to happen to you is going to happen to you, and you have to sit back and take it. And by negating their argument, we will establish that humans do have free will. Does that make sense? We're going to negate this argument so we can establish that free will is something that we have. We mentioned 2 weeks ago that there are a group from the Ahl Sunnah known as the Ash'arites, and these are a group of individuals who do not believe that you can decipher between intellectual good and intellectual evil, and that stops them from believing in Adala. And by not believing in Adala, you now put into Imama into question, for example, so on and so forth. In the same way that these Ash'arites deny that you can differentiate between intellectual good and intellectual evil, they therefore accept the concept of predestination. They're saying, look, there's nothing you can do, everything's written, you just got to deal with whatever card's been given to you, and that's just what's going to happen. It's already pre-written. They deny justice as a result. We're the opposites, and I just want to make this very clear. We're the opposite. We completely oppose this. We accept that we can decipher between intellectual good and evil, as we established 2 weeks ago. We know that the Prophet going to heaven makes sense. That's an intellectual good. And we know that Saddam Hussein going to hell is an intellectual evil. We can decipher that. Some things we can't decipher. We say we don't have the perfect lens. There's some obvious things we can. And because we accept that, we reject this concept of predestination. And therefore we accept free will and we accept justice. And we're going to go on to prove this. We say that predestination is not possible. It makes no logical sense if we believe in justice. So that's kind of like the general argument that we're going to go into. And now we're going to begin, inshallah. So predestination, we want to negate this. So let's understand the roots of where this argument of the fatalists, those who believe in predestination, come from. How do they come about this concept that everything is already written for you and there's nothing you can do about it? You have to sit back and just accept your fate. If we use our intellect correctly, that's a big assumption in today's day and age, but if we use our intellect and we engage it, everyone on this planet, without question, will deduce and will conclude that each of us have the ability to make decisions and choices in our life. Do we all agree on that? Everyone in the room, I just need to see a few nods of heads, that we have the ability every single moment, every single day, to make a decision and make a choice. I'm currently making the choice not to chuck this glass on the floor. That is a choice I'm making. But I could easily let go and this glass would fall on the floor. Nothing would stop it, right? Obviously Allah theoretically could intervene, but probably won't in this context, right? I'm equally taking the decision that I will take my next breath if Allah gives it to me, because I kind of need it to talk. Similarly, I'm making the active decision not to shout at anyone and start singing hymns of Christianity, because it would make sense in this setting, right? So I have the ability to make a choice in every single second of my life. And any logical person would say, yeah, of course we do. That is very much the case. So why is it then that fatalists exist? Even if you just take that very basic argument, that I don't think anyone would deny, that you're making free choice and you have free will in every second of your life, then how on earth do these fatalists believe in predestination? How do they even come about with this concept? Because that in itself is free will and free choice. Largely, their argument is this. They say, look, humans exist within a given environment, a given society, have a certain level of education, there's a political party and rule at that given time, there's a social culture that exists, there's some social norms, so on and so on and so on. And that all affects the human. That has an impact on us. And in fact, they even argue that someone's economic situation, let's say they have no money at all and they're starving, that can drive their decision making. So someone without any food for 2-3 days, no money at some point, their economic severity could drive their situation to go and steal from someone that they can go pay for their food. And they say that the totality of all these causes, social, economic, so on and so on and so on, can make us think that we have no choice in life whatsoever. Therefore, we don't actually make any decisions. We're just a reaction to the society, to this context, to the causes that we've been brought up in. And they say all of these factors come together, and we're basically just like the tide, we just go with whatever we have. We would say these concepts, these causes, are determinants. They're environmental determinants, they're economic determinants, they're educational determinants. They're determinants, for sure. But those who think this way have forgotten a very important point. And that is that the discussion of free will versus predestination, do I have a choice, do I not have a choice, is not a discussion about what influences are around you. It's not a discussion about what influences are around you. It's about complete causes. It's about the thing that drives you at the last second to make that conscious decision. What do I mean by that? Nobody can deny that these factors play a role, right? All of us, where we live today, as I said, we make decisions based on the environment that we're in, based on the workplace that we're in, based on the university that we're in, based on the school that we're in. We are in that environment, and that plays a role in our decisions and what we do. But at the end of the day, the decision is entirely with us. Even in the most severe of contexts, where you have minimal economic upliftment in your society, where you are threatened with murder, where your house could be burnt down, where people are outside your door ready to come and kill you if you don't give allegiance, for example, like Lady Fatima alayhi salam. Regardless, Lady Fatima alayhi salam, still in that severe moment, gets up, makes the decision, and defends her imam. While Hussaini alayhi salam knows in that moment that he is about to be killed, but he makes a decision to still stand against this tyrannical regime. But every single factor that we just mentioned is so severe at that point, yet that's not determining his decision. That's not determining Lady Fatima's decision. That's not determining any revolutionary's decision. No matter how much corruption is around them, all these factors are determinants. But at the end of the day, he or she determines exactly what they're going to do. Does everyone get that? Does that make sense? Inshallah, if it does, Muhammad sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Any questions, any points? And leave this point to sink in. Yeah, go for it.
What if someone was to say that these influences that you talk about, they can be predicted, and therefore that is somebody gave this argument I didn't have the answer to.
Sure.
So if all these, if your environment and all your life choices and your whatever has happened in your life, now they can predict what's happening, so therefore it is that is evidence that it is
it's going to happen, it's predestined, yeah.
How would you counteract that argument?
I love it. It's a very, very simple argument that I'll use. I mean, as always, your child usually teaches you most lessons in life, right? It's the same in the moment. If you hold his hands, he can stand and he can take steps, but he wobbles very slowly, right? I know that if I let go, what's going to happen? It's just going to fall, right? So even if you put someone in a certain scenario, you know what's going to happen to a decent degree. But there is a chance he could take that very next step. Because one day he will, inshallah, right? One day, at some point, we're going to let go and he's going to like wobble. And then we're like, I've done it. And maybe fall down like 20 seconds later, right? But at some point it's going to happen. At some point, we as an individual make a decision. No matter how much suffering we're put through, we can still make that decision. It's the same way that, for example, and I use this example when we talk about patience and anger, etc. If someone punches you, you have a choice. 99.9% of the population are probably going to react with aggression, swearing or punch back or whatever. But that 0.01% are going to remain patient in that moment. So yes, there's an absolutely high likely chance, therefore we can imagine that this is going to happen. But there is also this glimmer that even in the most severe of situations, the individual's got a choice, and he's going to smile back and say, no problem, and walk off, and then that's his injury. Does that make sense? It's never a definite, and you can never prove an example where it's a definite. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah?
I think it makes sense to me, not to the person.
At the end of the day, there is if I'm not mistaken, it's hadith, there is enough light for those who wish to see, right? At some point, that's why I said, as a rational, intellectual human engaging your brain correctly, you're going to say, well, yeah, of course I have a choice. At the final moment. And this is why, if we didn't have a choice, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His justice on us wouldn't be fair. Right? That's why we're saying, that's exactly what we're trying to get to, that without this free will, Allah's justice doesn't make sense. So you have to accept it. So even in this dire situation, no matter how much corruption you face, you still have a choice. So all of these factors are merely factors. They don't determine for sure what's going to happen. They can have a big stake on what's going to happen. You can have a high probability as to what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, you make the choice. So we have to separate out between complete causes and causes. There is a difference. And if we were only ever the product of our environment, our situation, our society, and if we were only ever the product of these determinant factors, we would never have seen a single revolution occur in this world. The fact that we've seen revolutions in the harshest of situations, and I'm not even talking about Shia Islamic revolutions that we revive, I'm talking about even if you say the Industrial Revolution, for example, or even revolutions in different countries of liberation or whatever against British colonialism, so on and so forth. If we didn't have a choice, none of these would have happened. Because they were in tough constraints, right? Slavery, one of the worst things we see, the black slaves of America. Awful, right? Yet someone stood up and said, this is going to stop. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a white chap as well who actually stood up and abolished slavery. He made a choice. He's like, this isn't okay. Even though he could have played that game to his own strength and probably benefited quite a lot from a materialistic perspective. So we do have a choice at all points. And therefore, all of these factors show that all of the above shows that these factors do not make one's destiny. You are in control of your decision making. Just like in summer, in Shahr Ramadan, that we've experienced in the last few years, no matter how hot the central line is, and how long your day at work has been, and how little water you had at suhoor, even if your colleague so lovingly is like, do you want some water when you're on the train home, you still have to make a decision. You still have to make a decision. The majority of people in the world, if they don't believe in something, which day I'll take the water. We turn around and say, no, I have to dig deep and make a choice. I have to prioritize. If we were solely the subject of our environmental factors, 35-degree heat, plus a central line feeling like it's Jahannam level 1, plus not having water the whole day, and he gives you a cold cup, you're probably going to take it. But no, I have the ability to override all of that, I engage my intellect, and I make a decision, and my actions follow. Thus, all the motives which cause one's destiny exist within the human being's free will. It's all within us. We're able to do it. What other arguments do the fatalists, to those who believe in predestination, what other arguments do they bring? Ayatollah Nasir Mukarram Shirazi, remember this is all from his book, The 50 Lectures on the Principles of Faith for the Youth. He looks at political context. And this one's actually quite subtle. I wouldn't say it's the most convincing thing I've heard, but actually when you think about it and reflect on it, you're like, maybe that's believable. And when I initially say, you'll be like, nonsense, given what's going on in our political situation. But actually when you think a little bit deeper and you think of the UK setup, you'll start to realise this is probably ringing true. He says, look, some of the factors that influence you to think that you don't have a choice include the political situation that you're in. So many political parties will set up the situation such that you think that you don't have a free will. I.e., history's happened and history's going to happen to you and you're just a passenger in all of this. You can't do much about it. And extreme situations will have communities that have been deprived of any funding constantly, and they never think they're going to be able to get out of it. And you start to believe that that is the case. However, according to our intellect, according to divine law, according to our belief in how destiny works, the fate lies within us. We're able to stand up, we're able to create a campaign, and we're able to find a way out of it. And I think we've seen that recently in this country with a big left-wing movement, that you've seen some communities that otherwise would have got no care, no funding, nothing, have actually stood up, created campaigns, and no, we're not going to live in this oppression that you put upon us, we're going to speak up. Now, probably thinking that makes sense, fine, so is it that big a deal? Let me show you something very subtle about the political system here that will illustrate to you that we feel like we're suffering, but we don't realise it, or we don't think we can get out of it. For those of you who are earning, you'll get every year an income tax report as to how much tax you have given to the UK government, right? And it gives you a nice pie chart with the breakdown. And within there, you see military spending, what they call defence. Now that for us should not sit very comfortably, because we know it's not defence, we know it's offence, and we know it's against our own people. Now, if I were to ask you, could you campaign as a Hussaini to get a little bit of funding for the building works? But yeah, of course, even though we're marginalised, we could, fine. If I were to ask you, okay, as a UK population that do not agree with the UK's offence against certain countries, could you campaign to get rid of military spending coming out of your tax? I think the majority of us would be like, well, that's a bit too far. That's how subtly these political influences can have on our situation, such that we're like, no. Us being able to talk about or influence where our tax money goes, that's difficult. That's a step too far. If you're a Labour government, if you're a Tory government, if you're a Lib Dem government, if you're Green, if you're independent, well, that one's a bit tough. We can't make that happen. It just shows how subtle these political pressures and social pressures can actually be on us. But theoretically, we would all believe, no, if we really tried, we could make it happen. We could. But we think, because of the political pressures around that, we can't. That's a very scary thought, because then it's not just money, it's belief system, it's the worldview that everything else has been created around us, that we think, oh, we can't have a say in that, we can't have a say in that. So this divine fate and destiny is determined through our movements, through our desires, through our willpower, through our faith, through our efforts, through the endeavours that we make. And when you start to think about that, you see how beautiful Shahr Ramadan is. This is a personal reflection, right? Shahr Ramadan is a time where, if you've not been to the spiritual gym for the entire year, Allah's like, you've got no choice, but you're doing 30 days with me this time. You have to. You've got to come, and you've got to struggle. Because if you don't build up this ability to abstain from that which is otherwise halal for you in any other time of the year, there is no way you're going to be able to survive when I put you back in the day-to-day of life. There's no way. You know that first day after Shahr Ramadan and Eid, where you're like, wow, I've just done 30 days without eating food in the whole day. No matter how many times you fast, you still have this moment like, oh, I'm eating in the day. This is quite a cool phenomenon, right? I can drink in the day. You kind of feel this ability that spiritually you're stronger than ever before. That if something happens that otherwise would have got you, you're now like, no, you know I can do it. Because you're trained, you're ready. But over time, we usually lose that muscle, unfortunately, because of the mistakes that we make. So that was one of the factors, political. I'm saying politically, actually, there are pressures on us that make us think that we have no choice in anything. Like, can we influence where our money's going? The second, and this one may be more pertinent to you and I, and this one may hit home and it may hurt, and I ask you for your forgiveness. It's not with the intention of hurting, but it's something that we all need to do our own accounting for in our own heads. The second factor that sometimes fatalists or that fatalists bring forward to say, look, you have no choice, just accept what you are. And remember, we have a scale, free will to determinism. We're looking at the extreme. So whilst I'm saying we're definitely over here and we intellectually believe we're over here, there is every chance that some of our mannerisms are actually towards this side. And this one, I think, is applicable to me more than anyone. The second factor that can influence and make us think that we don't really have a choice is through our own laziness and indifference and psychological mindset. Because within us, unfortunately, lazy individuals exist. And we just simply give up. In difficult situations, we're like, you know what, we just accept our fate. Just hands up, we just got to deal with it. Rather than confronting that own deficiency that we face. Rather than being real with ourselves. You know when someone gives you feedback, right? Someone that you trust gives you feedback. Like, Salik, listen, you've got this big issue. And the next thing you know, you're defensive. You're shouting at them. Yeah, you're saying, nah, it's not me, it's not me. But deep down, you know they've just hit you on that point that you are so insecure about, but you don't want to admit it. Within us, we're like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it, there's nothing I can do about it. No, there's always something you can do about it. You can always be less arrogant. You can always be more empathetic. You can always be kinder. You can always be less aggressive. You can always be more generous. You can always be less stingy. You always have the choice. But maybe we have some fatalist traits within us that make us go, no, I was just made this way. I'm an introvert, therefore I'm an introvert. I'm not saying that introverts are bad, I'm not saying that extroverts are good or bad, but there are good and bad sides to both traits. Oh, I'm just an extrovert, so I'm made this way, therefore I can't be quiet. No, there is a time and place for you to learn when to not talk. I'm an introvert, it's not up for me to stand up for people's rights. No, there is a time where you invest in your introverted nature, there's a time where you need to train and be vocal. Never to the suppression. Maybe within us we have a bit of a determinism kind of mindset. We get lazy psychologically. And we're like, oh, I've just been built this way, so I can't really do anything about it. Like I said, maybe there's just a dusting of that. The extreme of this, again, is those who in society, maybe friends, colleagues at work, who are like, oh, there's nothing we can do about it, we just have to accept the world that we live in. Defeatist, completely can't be bothered. And it comes from laziness. Deep down they know they can make a change, but they're like, no, can't be bothered. But the point I just mentioned before was this spiritual version of that. The next is social factors. So a bit similar to the political side and a bit similar to the psychological, but this one's again a little bit more hitting home. And that is that those who are like, you know what, this world's been made, however it got made. I really just want to enjoy it. I really want to enjoy it. I want to go and drink, I want to go to a club, I want to go listen to music, I want to go to drugs, I want to go to this, I want to go to that. What's the point? Socially, they're unable to control their desires whatsoever. They're in such a dangerous position that they have no willpower anymore. And they're completely given to their carnal desires. And their carnal desires, they follow them, and they use the reason for determinism to be like, you know what, I know I'm going to hell anyway. How many times do you hear that phrase? Oh, I know I'm going to go to hell anyway, and they laugh about it, and you're like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. I'm not sure I want to be here with you, right? But it's become such a norm, it's so subtle, it's become such a norm. Oh, I know I'm going to go to hell anyway, so what's the point? It's too late for me now anyway. What's the point in praying? What's the point? I've not prayed for 20 years, what's the point? I've not been doing this for 20 years, what's the point? They just use this, what's the point? I already know what's going to happen, it's already written for me, as an excuse to not change. Because they're in such pursuit of their carnal desires. They justify it just by saying that. They know, deep down, it's lies. They know that tomorrow, when they're faced with that beer can, when they're faced with that person they should be speaking to, when they're faced with that iPod or that iTouch or that MP3 player or whatever, that they can avoid pressing play. They have a decision to make. But they still don't. And you can see how sensitive this can get in terms of the kind of examples we can go into. I'm not going to go into them. But it's something for us to reflect on tonight, inshallah. Yes, I really hope, and the fact that you guys are attending here and have been attending so regularly for the last few weeks suggests, most likely, that you don't believe that we have no choice. But deep down, maybe there is a glimmer in each of us that makes us think, on that one I haven't got a choice. Maybe we've got a glimmer of that on us with a very, very small thing that is actually so significant. It's not about what the sin is, it's about who we're sinning in front of. Thus, in order to build a healthy society, a prosperous society, we have to struggle against this fatalist viewpoint. Because you can see the direction it can take people down. Imagine just for a moment, right, that all of us, everyone on this earth, lived in such a way that they're like, whatever happens to us happens, you just got to accept it. And that I don't need to change. I'm just going to be who I am because I know what's going to happen. And you know what? If I fancy doing that, I'm just going to do it. You'll basically be living under a Tory government. You'll basically be you won't be in a very nice place. But let's be real, and thankfully we live in a country we can talk about, and I don't think anyone in this country is supporting him. Boris Johnson, for me, is like one of the biggest caricatures of this exact situation. When it comes to like the inability to stand by a decision, to be fair, to be just. It's incredible what's come out in this last week. He's given the opportunity for 18 months to come out and say, yes, I was out in this beer garden in Downing Street. All this time to admit to that mistake. Not only is he like, no, I don't know if anything. He was attending it. Deep down he had a choice. He could make that choice. Eventually he made a choice to apologise, probably because he was forced. Now I use that as a caricature because it needs to reflect onto us. Because the same way he had to stand in Parliament yesterday in PMQs, I'm going to have to stand on Yawm al-Hisab, on the day of accounting, Yawm al-Nida, on the day of regrets, Yawm al-Qiyamah, on that final day, and I'm going to be up on that stand as well. And Allah's going to look at me and he's going to be like, okay, so you're going to admit it now? We said in Dua-E-Kumayl on along the lines of Allah, forgive me for those sins which you've concealed from everyone. Allah knows them, I just don't want to look back at them. But guess what? The same way that Boris got called out, I'm going to get called out. And those sins that Allah has concealed all this time, you're like, okay, now time to talk about it. We also say in Dua-E-Kumayl that all of our limbs are going to testify to it. Your tongue is not able to lie anymore, it's not able to pretend anymore. The hand's going to say, yeah, I picked up that can. It's going to say, yeah, I listened to that. The head's going to say, no, I wasn't covered. The eye's going to say, yeah, I did look at this. So again, I'm going down a slightly spiritual path here as well, because I think from a literalist perspective, I think we all understand, we do believe in free will, etc. But there is spiritual understanding in this for us to get. And if we're able to live in a society where, no, people realise you can bring about change, that this situation you can improve, that you can improve yourself, that's a from Prophet. Did you have a hand up, sorry? No, okay. Does that all make sense so far, inshallah? It's a relatively easier topic to take in today than 2 weeks ago. We'll just run through this second half, inshallah, and then we can end. But if you'd like to continue, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. So we kind of completely destroyed fatalism and determinism. Does that clarify when you asked the question of the week? In terms of that side of it, yeah? So great, we put that to bed. Now how does free will, which is what we believe in, the fact that we're able to make decisions, corroborate with the usul, with our usul al-din? So we're going to try and look at the general conscience of a human being, the fact that we now establish that the human being does have the ability to make its own decisions, therefore it has free will. How does this actually come about? And how is it kept in check, if you put it that way? And this is how it leads to the adalah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So no matter what, again, any intellectual person with their brain switched on, etc., all those conditions, any person in this room, and anyone like us, inshallah, wouldn't deny the following reality. So they would agree with the following reality, for sure. And that is that all human beings, whether you are a believer or an unbeliever, whether you live in the west or the east, whether you're rich or poor, whatever, any person with their intellect engaged would agree that a group of humans in a society, in a classroom, in a gathering, in any given context, needs to abide by a certain set of rules in order to bring about harmony and perfection. Does anyone disagree with this claim? And I do my inverse. If you agree with this claim, put your hand up. Okay, so the sisters don't know. So let me try and explain. Does anyone put your hands up, please, if this makes sense? Okay, I'm going to re-explain it. Every conscious, intellectual, thinking, switched on human being agrees that in any situation they're in, a community centre, a school, a university, a country, wherever you are, in order for that community to thrive, to be prosperous, to be harmonious, the humans need to live by a certain set of rules for that to happen. Put your hands up if you agree. Yeah? Okay, inshallah. Why? Because if there's no rules, everyone goes around stabbing each other. Or theoretically could. Right? So we all live by a certain set of rules. We all recognize that when this Muppet here is speaking, people try to listen, right? And that when we ask questions, there's a time and place to do it. There's etiquette. There are rules that we obey, right? And if I kept shouting and I was in the audience, I'm sure one of the organisers would say, actually, maybe don't come next time, right? So there are, even at that point, subtle laws that we obey in order to create a harmonious situation that we can all prosper. So we all agree that in order for these humans to interact with one another, there needs to be this existence of a law, whatever that law is, a law of sorts, that the human has a level of responsibility before it. If they break the law, they need to be held to account and face your punishment, right? Those are the three factors. The law exists, They need to be held accountable, and they'll face a punishment if it doesn't go well. You need a deterrent if something goes wrong. The fact that we can prove this for every single human that engages their intellect on this planet is the clearest proof that humans have free choice, have free will. Why? Why does that make it such a critical argument that every single human therefore must have free will and free choice? Because how can we accept that there isn't free choice if we all agree that we need to abide by a law and be punished if we don't? It wouldn't make sense. There's a law. If you go against it, then you get punished. If you now tell me I don't have control over my actions, then how can I hold you to account? It wasn't you that did it. It was something else that did it. I need to control your controller. I need to hold God to account if you believe that God is now. But how are we going to do that? Do you see how the argument doesn't work? It's illogical. I'm going to hold you to account if you do something wrong, but you don't have the ability to control your situation. So how am I going to hold you to account? But we just agreed a step before that for any humans in any situation, any gathering, in order to create a harmonious situation, you need to obey a certain level of rules. Which is why, if you bring a baby and they start crying, no one's going to have a go at it, because the poor thing doesn't know what it's doing. If you bring an adult and you just start shouting, you're like, actually, sorry, that doesn't quite work here. Because they're in control of their actions. He has free will. He's able to control himself. The baby is not. So free will must exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't hold people to account. It wouldn't make sense. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah? Sean. If we deny free will and choice in a human, what then happens? We actually become a victim of fate. So if we say, no, I don't have control at all, I'm no different to a stone. Why? I pick up a stone, and I lob it. And that stone, like, stop, like Matrix style, and just like reverse what's happened and come back. No, of course it can't, right? The stone has no ability to control what's going to happen. It's going to get thrown, it's going to get thrown. Close. You could probably throw me, but I'm going to try my best for you not to, right? I'm going to try and be in control of my fate. Again, that is the difference. If you now start to say that humans have this concept of predestination, that we have no free will, no free choice, you are likening humans to stone. It's so illogical, yet people believe it today. And we're not even using complicated arguments, we're just like the basics of the basics of the basics. Yet we have faiths, and we have even Islamic schools of thought built that free will doesn't exist and determinism does exist. That's how extreme things have got, despite how simple these arguments are. So we have a crossroad. Either you deny the existence of the common conscience of everyone, either you deny the free will of everyone, and therefore consider all courts, all laws, all sharia, everything completely useless, including the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or you simply deny and reject fatalists, predeterminism, etc. It's a very easy choice. I think for any logical human being at that point, you're like, yeah, it's pretty easy. And ironically, and this is the hilarious part, those who are fatalists, those who do believe in determinism, those who do believe that you can't do anything about it and just got to go with the flow, when they get punched, they choose to react. When they have a car accident, they try and take that guy to court. They're going to that same court that should turn around to them and say, the guy had no choice in what he did, so what are we going to do? Sue him? Well, I can't do anything about it. He didn't control it. Oh, the baby fell on my carpet. Okay, what do you want me to do? The baby fell on my carpet. Poor kid. Do you see the point here? It just doesn't add up. But where does that leave us? And you can see kind of where it leads us, inshallah, for next week. Given that we have choice, given that we believe that in order to create this harmonious society and for humans to reach their potential, there are laws by which we need to abide by. Otherwise, we're going to go and kill people, we're going to go steal from people, we're going to do all the stuff that our common side wants us to do. We need to be held to account as well. And that is the adalah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When He puts us in our rightful place, depending on what we've done in our decisions in this life. We can't then turn around and say, Ya Allah, come on. You dealt me a harsh hand, you know. Yeah, but I also gave you free will to overcome it. I gave you the ability to overcome it. You chose not to. You chose to give in at that point. You chose to listen to that. You chose to do this. So what do you want to? I need to put you in my rightful place. In your rightful place. And unfortunately, given how many blessings I've given to you, and given how simple an issue this was, yet you took the mick out of it, your rightful place is not in heaven. And at that point, we hope Allah judges us not with His adala, but with His rahmah, with His mercy. All these lines in Dua-E-Kumayl, that how is that you could put me into hellfire when I've been the one that puts their frustration on, puts their head on the floor and prostrates to you, that professes your tawheed, that calls out to the leaders of the mu'mineen. How? I did this my whole life. How are you now going to do it? Hey heart, this isn't what is expected of you, Allah. ما هكذا الذن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. That you should do this with your mercy and your rahmah, which is what I've come to know of you. These lines in Dua-E-Kumayl are incredible when it comes to this adala. Because we go through it and we confess, well, you know what, Allah, you're great. And I messed up, so please forgive me. Allah, you're so great and you've covered everything for me. Allah, even though you've covered everything for me, I've still taken the mick. I've still pushed it to extents. Allah, if you're going to send me to hell, which should be the absolutely right thing to do given what I've done, what about your mercy? Because I've been taught about your mercy. And how are you going to send me there if I've done all of this? And you know what, Allah, because I now love you so much, and look at the journey the individual goes on through this dua. I've changed so much throughout this dua, I've changed so much throughout my life, that even if you chuck me into hell, the thing that's going to hurt me is not the flames, it's the distance from you. It's the fact that I can't remember you anymore. That's what's more painful to me than the fire of hell. But we don't realize that for dunya, that the separation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so severe in our life. But in dua to tell, وَتَتَحَبَّبُ إِلَيَّ فَتَبَغَّضُ إِلَيْكَ. That you show me love, and I return to you anger. Look at that line. You show me love, and I return to you anger. So at some point, because we believe in free will, because we believe we have a choice, every single decision we make, we're going to be able to account for it. You can now see how the adala of Allah makes sense, and how the sharia of Allah makes sense. But anyway, run a little bit sideway. What we've just mentioned there previously, not that, but I just mentioned prior to that, we were looking at free will versus predestination, and we were using the argument from a perception of a non-believer and a believer. So we're saying from a very simplistic point of view that you do make a decision, it's not like you don't, you're not like a stone. It's like very basic concepts. But if we now were to be speaking to a religious audience, to theists who are maybe debating this, and we say, okay, now you're choosing between free will and determinism. If you choose the side of determinism, then the faith is opposed to God. If you don't have any choice about your actions, then to be honest, the faith is gone. The whole point of this creation is gone. Because how can we reconcile the justice of Allah, which we've just proven, when someone does an evil deed, but Allah can't hold him to account? Because he wasn't in control of it. What was the whole point, therefore, of having spiritual rewards mentioned in the Quran? Of having azab, punishments mentioned in the Quran? Having Jannah and Jahannam, heaven and hell? Having the book of your deeds that the angels write? Having the questions in your grave? Man Rabbak? Man Imamak? Man Qiblatuk? Who's your God? Who's your Imam? What's your Kaaba? What's your book? Etc. etc. What's the point of having a divine reckoning, Yawm al-Qiyamah, that we hear over and over and over again in the Quran? We mentioned verses 2 weeks ago that everyone's going to be held to account for what they've done on the day of reckoning. What's the point of all this encouragement and praise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for those of you who are like this, then there is an amazing reward for you. For those of you who hold taqwa, then there is this for you. For those of you who do this, there's a great punishment for you. What's the whole point of this entire faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been speaking about in the Quran if you don't even have a choice about what you do? We could absolutely rock up on Yawm al-Qiyamah and then turn around and say, Allah, I had no choice, so just put me in neutral. Whatever that looks like. It just doesn't logically make sense. And in addition, in religion, one of the first issues that we encounter is our duty in this life, our responsibility. But does duty or responsibility make any sense if the individual has no choice? Of course not. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And this line I love actually. Until Anasa uses this phrasing, he says, can we tell a person whose hand involuntarily shakes involuntarily shakes. If you have someone whose hand and they can't control it, it just shakes people's hands, not to shake their hand. Can you punish them for that? Of course not. It wouldn't make sense. أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب عليه أفضل الصلاة والسلام اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وأعداءهم. In a famous tradition recorded in Al-Kafi, it's reported to talk about the school of fatalism. And when talking about it, he's reported to say, these words of idol worshipping brothers, enemies of God, members of Shaitan's party. That's how severe the warning is from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it comes to these concepts of predestination. Because you can see the impact it can have. When you start going down that slippery road, and we know people from within our own communities, who basically said, what's the point? What's the point? What's the point? What's the point? I'm already going to hell anyway. Hope is finished. Hope is finished. It's already written for me. That's someone who's given up. And it's your responsibility. يأمرون يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر. You need to call upon to them goodness and forbid them from evil. That is your responsibility. That is part of your furu', indeed just as salah, songs, etc. You're going to lift their spirits, but look, you can make this decision. You've got a decision. And inshallah we're able to make this correct decisions and journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and avoid his adab and embrace his mercy and his love, which he has so much of. So much that we can be benefiting from if we're able to just abstain from that, which may in the short term feel beneficial to us, but in the long term have severe ramifications for us, just by using that free will that Allah has given us. Don't ever think the decision is made up. And I'll just end on this very, very random thing that came up on YouTube yesterday. It was incredible. You guys heard of Muazzam Beg, the Bangladeshi guy? Yes, he was held in, I think, Guantanamo Bay, if I'm not saying, for many years. There's a short clip from him on YouTube. I was like, wow, it's one of those that, you know, when Allah sends me that sign, could be one of those. I'm only joking, I don't think that's how the world works. Anyway, so they're interviewing him, and he went through like torture, and Guantanamo Bay guys went through a lot of torture, so on and so on. And he said, we were on, I think it was a flight, or we were in some kind of like prison camp with the US soldiers, and they were like held as hostage or whatever. And the guy next to him said, have we prayed your mother? Imagine. Tied up. Who knows what situation, right? But you could probably say like tied up, maybe bags on their faces, especially when they're moving prisoners around, they don't want to see each other, where, who knows? But he goes, the guy next to him says to him, whispers, have you prayed your mother? Muazzam Beg says, he replies and he goes, what the hell? How are you remembering Maghrib right now? What's wrong with you? So the guy's like, this is our responsibility, yeah? This is, again, look at the free will. Even in that moment, this guy's remembering himself. He continues and he says, a US soldier who came up to his friend, put a knife to his neck, and goes, if you speak one more time, you know what's going to happen. And the guy said, Allahu Akbar, and it started. Look at that free will. Now, whether this anecdote is true or not, you know, whether those are good people, I don't know. Muazzam Beg was proved to be innocent, it seems, who knows who he was speaking to. So sometimes when you hear these kind of concepts, when you hear about the shuhada, modern and back in the day, even Imam Hussaini Islamic, the amount that they're going through and the conviction in their decisions, that free will that they have, how can you deny free will when you see these individuals in the face of tyranny and oppression? Say that Zainab alayhi salam stands up and ridicules this umayyad government, ridicules them. Lady Fatima alayhi salam, despite being under so much pressure and fear, creates a lesson for us to show that imamah comes before anything, because that is the defense of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's perfect faith. Kill me if you want, no issues. Imamah comes first. But here's me struggling to avoid the most basic of challenges that Allah puts in my life. The most basic of challenges. I'm too tired for it. When you start to say, oh, I'm too tired, I'm too tired, I'm too this, you're just fleeing towards this determinism world, this fatalism world, where you're like, oh, I concede everything, I can't do anything, I can't do anything. But then you meet some people who, no matter what, they've got time for it. They prioritize it. They find a way. They have such strong willpower. Yet those who look on like, oh, that's because you got it easy. No, don't be the guy that's constantly making an excuse. Wake up, realize you have free will, and inshallah journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lastly, just this. If you deny that decision, if you don't let yourself make the decision, see it this way. You're denying a bounty that Allah has given you. He's given you the opportunity to engage this intellect, to get closer to Him. He's given you a gift. And how ungrateful would it be if I bought you that chocolate kebab and you didn't eat it? Allah has given you the free will. Use it. Use it. Because when you don't, you've got to be held account for that on one day, inshallah. But hopefully we don't need to be amongst those. Does anyone have any questions or any points they would like to go for it? So, John.
What if something happened by random chance? Is that free will or God forbid, fate?
Could you give an example?
What if you were specifically chosen by someone or by a draw and you had to suffer for it? Would that be free will, or would that be someone else's free will?
What do you mean by you were chosen by a draw to suffer? Sorry, I don't understand the example.
Just if you were randomly chosen for something, would that be free will, or would that be fate?
Okay. So let's say, for example, something that happens to you at random. We gave that example the other week. Actually, let's say you're hit by a car. What's just happened? There's so many things that happen in order for that to happen, right? So many different things that have happened in order for that to happen. Maybe the guy was drunk, maybe this, maybe that, whatever, who knows? But in any case, it's happened to you. You have a choice still, right? Obviously, assuming you're alive at this point, right? If you're dead, unfortunately you're dead. But if you have a point to react, then you have a choice. How do you react? Do you forgive this guy, do you not forgive this guy? If, for example, for whatever reason you're chosen as someone, or whatever circumstance happened and you lose all your money, you have a choice. There's two different sides here. What's the cause of something happening to you, and what's the resulting effect? Today we're discussing the resulting effect. We're saying whatever happens to you, you have free will to make decisions on the back of that. Whatever cards you're dealt in this world, for whatever reason, you need to react to that. But last week or 2 weeks ago we spoke about the cause of it. Where does this evil come from? Is evil such a thing? Is it the absence of goodness? Does it come from Allah, or is it actually man's many layers worth of decisions that have unfortunately landed you in a very difficult position? For example, you and your family from Afghanistan, a very difficult situation back in Afghanistan, right? Not because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but because, unfortunately, corrupt governments and corrupt people and so on and so on and so on, layers by layers by layers, has unfortunately led to the country being in such a difficult position. But every person in Afghanistan still has a choice. This is the second part of what we discussed today. Free will to make a decision. Am I going to stand up, or am I going to conform? Am I going to leave? Am I going to stay? What am I going to do? Right? It's a tough decision. So that makes sense. There's two different sides to your question. There's where did the thing originate from, which we discussed 2 weeks ago. And then we're saying, once whatever has happened to you has happened, what do you now do? And you always have free will in that situation. No one can ever take that free will away from you. Even when they put a knife to your neck, and you see that, I remember when Daesh first took over Iraq, and you would see these videos, and they were awful, right? And in Sham as well, where they put a knife to this guy's neck, and they're like, what do you want to say? And they end with their shahada, including Ashhadu anna Ali waliyullah. They'd be killed. Making that decision till the end. Whether that's right or wrong is a different question, but they're making that decision. So there's the cause, which we've discussed, and this week we discussed what you then do with it, the free will that you have. Does that make sense?
Thank you for beautifully articulating this.
The
question is so try for us to break it down into these two segments. We've got the free will, and then we talk about the rules. Okay, so if I dissect the rules, that's where the dichotomy of how far do you push those rules, right? Do you make those rules as guidance, or do you make them as deterministic rules? So in that dichotomy, the dilemma is where we are in an Islamic country, a Muslim country, where somebody's free will is not to the power of the fatwa or hijab and stuff. But you get, there is police. So if you take Iran, for example,
Saudi Arabia, for
Sure.
example, that's Saudi Arabia before Salman Khan did it. But, at that time, it was pretty much, those rules were pretty much used. So how far do you go in the rules, and where do you stop on the rule side and let people have that free will?
That's tough. That's a very tough question. I would put it, this is now personal opinion, right? This is an interesting discussion, right? So where, if you were running a country, how far do you push the rules of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? I would say you look back to how the Prophet did it. Because he experienced the society that he was living in and also ruled where there were people who believed and people who didn't believe. Lakum dinukum waliya din, right? To you yours and to ours in terms of faith, right? And he found a way to enable all societies to live harmoniously together, despite, this is a very important point actually, despite what Western history tries to teach us, that the Prophet was a man who spread the word of Allah through the sword, and that he was oppressive, so on and so on and so on. There's a reason why even till today, you find in Iraq, for example, people revering Sayyid al-Sistan.
Because he rules that country. He raised Hashd al-Sha'bi and the group to kill off Daesh through one fatwa on one Friday afternoon that I remember still back in, I think, 2014, 2015, right? 2013, 14, something like that. So you see the way that he treats and interacts with the Pope and whatever. All learned from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the same way that the Holy Prophet would be like, look, you guys don't need to pay khums. That's not on you. You don't have this tax. But given that you are members of the society, given that we want redistribution of income to make sure there's good healthcare and education, whatever, it's important that you contribute towards the economy. Therefore, there is a specific tax for you that is not a tax from Islam. So maybe this is one of the ways, right? I don't know, maybe from that we learn that, yes, you don't impose what we believe in on them, but you still see the value and the why behind it, and you create something for them. But, do we go as far as you said, old school Saudi Wahhabi police, where it's like, where's your 6 layers of hijab and so on and so on? I don't know. I'm not sure. But I always think there's a very subtle word actually, in work, when you hold yourself with a certain level of character, people will appreciate that around you. Even, for example, if you have members of your family, for example, who may not wear hijab, sometimes they'll come and before they enter your house specifically, they'll wear their hijab. In another house they don't. Why? Because they realize this house carries a level of, hopefully, taqwa, and hopefully not judgmental, which is the other side of it, right? So I don't know, maybe that's something that we learn from the Holy Prophet and how he interacted with the Jews and Christians of his time. We could look into that.
Death is destined, so is that free will? Because when people smoke or drink, they say, if we die, we die. Or if someone's contemplating suicide, which is free will, so they choose whether to take their own life. But isn't that their...
It's a really good question.
Allah has written everyone's death, is that considered their free will, or is that considered Allah's?
It's a really good question. There's a similarity between the day of the emergence of our awaited Saviour and the death of an individual. So I'm going to use the example of the awaited Saviour, and this is from Sayyid Al-Khabar, so if I get this wrong, inshallah, I can refer you back to the book, The Mahdi Understanding the Awaited One. I think it's chapter 5, chapter 4, so I'll find it for you. He talks about our awaited Saviour, and he says, look, the day of the emergence of our awaited Saviour is known by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's known. That day, let's say for example, could have been on day 1. I'm choosing a random set scheme. It could have been on day 1. But because the killing of Imam Hussaini Islamic happened, or because a certain issue happened, it changed to day 50. Because Allah decreed it to be the case. Did Allah know that that change was going to happen? Yes, of course He knew. But from us to understand it, it was here. Certain factors impacted the date. The fact that a date is known does not negate the possibility that the date can change. Does that make sense? The fact that a date is known does not influence the fact that the date can change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the day of the emergence of Al-Qa'im and Al-Muhammad, for example, is going to be the year 2057 in terms of Gregorian calendar. But at one point it could have been 2043. At one point it could have been 1972.
But because different things in society are happening, determinants affect it. But Allah knows where it's going to end up. This is our belief when it comes to al-Qa'im. Otherwise, if that date was not able to change, why do we have so many different ahadith and du'as that tell us, Allahumma ajjil li waliyika al-faraj, oh Allah, hasten the reappearance? If this du'a didn't have an effect on the date, then why would we recite it? One of the determinant factors of when our awaited Saviour is going to re-emerge is based on the intellectual and spiritual maturity of the society, and equally how bad it is as well, right? Because if the Imam comes at a time where he then says, look at this haqq, and the society is not ready for it, he'll be rejected, and that can't happen. The society has to be ready. What do I mean by that? If the Imam were to come 2,000 years ago and say, guys, take this phone and call your uncle, tell him that I've arrived, they'd be like, what's this phone? They don't get it. They'll reject him, think he's a magician, like they did with the Prophet. But society over time culturally learns, because we're constrained by time and space, we can only learn at a certain speed. And eventually now, if the Imam were to come today and say, take this phone, call your uncle, tell him that I've arrived, you'd be like, yeah, I know what to do with the phone, I get it. So there are determinant factors that mean the Imam can come at a certain point. And one of those, for example, just to make it practical for us to understand, is how intellectually stimulated or appreciative of certain science and technology the society is. And then the Imam could come. That's one of the factors. Now that can change. If society stops and doesn't progress fast enough, then that date needs to be moved on a bit more. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that that date's going to be moved on a bit more because He's infinitely wise. So the fact that the date exists and is known by Allah, that does not negate that the date can change. Both can live in harmony. They're not negations of one another. So in the same way with death, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows 7th of February, you're off. Why? Because He knows you're going to commit suicide on that day. Had you not, you would have lived another 35 years. But there are determinants that can affect this date. Allah knows what the eventual thing is going to be. But you could have potentially gone further. Does that make sense? Yeah? It's one that you have to try and get your head around. Again, it's us trying to understand something that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not understands, but He has infinite wisdom. So we know that He understands where the pendulum is going to end. But there are factors that affect the pendulum. If you push it again, it's going to move again. If you commit suicide, He knows you were going to commit suicide. In the same way, for example, that in life we have choices that we make every single day, right? So exactly said with drinking, maybe that's a slightly more aggressive one than suicide, right? I could live maybe to the year 2097 if I don't smoke. If I do smoke, I'll only make it to 2075 because I'm going to get cancer at 2060 and I'm going to have a really tough 15 years. Allah knows that that's going to happen. But if I don't, I would end up somewhere else. But He knows what's going to happen anyway. Does that make sense? Yeah, go on.
We also look at cultural rules made by community which may not be in accordance to Islamic laws, that they're given more importance. And if Allah has given a choice to us, isn't it haram to take away the right due to the community?
Repeat that last half, sorry.
If Allah has given us a choice, isn't it haram to take away the right due to the community?
Isn't it haram to take away the haqq, the right of the community?
Yeah.
Even if the community is going against the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is that the question? To make this very, very, very simple, sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala trumps anything. Trumps anything. So, if a community says, we're going to order 200 kebab rolls, when they know 100 people are going to attend, and therefore as-saraf is going to happen, and as-saraf is haram, and they say no, but it's just out of we need to show that we're a good community that we give, it's clear sharia would dictate that's not okay. In the same way, if a community says, you can take a very extreme example, we're not going to pray salah, but we're going to continue with azan. Obviously at the point of salah time it's not haram, but if they don't pray it, and therefore the time elapses, and therefore that is now haram because you've missed your salah, the azan is in question, of course. The haqq of anything is secondary to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sharia. even to the point of a mother. So if your mother says, I do not wish for you to pray, you have to disobey her on the assumption that you are baligh or baligha and that you are due to be praying at that time. You have to disobey her because the Sharia of Allah is greater than that of your mother. If your mother says, I prefer you not to go to the ziyarah of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, which is not wajib, and again there's some debates in some ways about this, but let's use that example. If your mother says, I do not want you to go to the masjid this evening, and it's not wajib on you to go to the masjid, the haqq of your mother is preserved. You follow that. That is the status of the mother. But, again, if they're doing it, so then there's another side, for example, where if you are told you cannot marry person X, and the guidance that's been given to you is not for a shari, solidified reason, then again, that is in question. You don't just follow, you're allowed to challenge. But from a, no, your community says you must do this, if that goes against the Sharia of Allah, Sharia of Allah always first. And this is something that we regularly misunderstand, and the community I'm from is awfully guilty at this, and I'll speak against my own community before anyone else's community. The fact that we are not allowing off non-Khojas to become members of our community is a nonsense, is an absolute farce. And we have no ability to reconcile when we say, so if the Imam comes and wants to therefore be the president of your community, according to our constitution that I am a member of, the Imam cannot be the leader of our community. Our Hussainiyah that does his dua every single day. That is nonsense. Racism is not allowed. That is racism. There's no way, it's discrimination, right? So from that perspective, I have to, from a free will perspective, speak up and be like, this is nonsense. How is that okay? So the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala always supersedes. When it comes to wajib and haram, always supersedes anything. And obviously there are some specific cases where if it's life or death, whatever. Does that make sense? So sorry if there's any cultural practice that the community here holds that maybe goes against the Sharia of Allah, but I hope it's not the case, and if it is, I'll never see you again, so it's been nice knowing you all. Inshallah, see you soon. Allahumma salli ala as ever, if it was beneficial, then please pray for Ayatollah Nas Makam Shirazi. Our scholars are getting older and older by the day, and we never know when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for their day to be that. So please pray for him. Any mistakes, please inform me. And if you want to read the book, especially on this part, please don't hesitate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you, Brother Salih, for another informative session, which we will benefit from, I'm sure. Inshallah, next week's session will be on the 20th of January, same time, 7:30 start, Dua-E-Kumayl, followed by discussion circle. And now we'll have Abbas Himani recite Ziyarat for us, Salawat.
السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله السلام عليك يا وارث نوح النبي الله السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث علي أمير المؤمنين ولي الله السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والبت الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين ولعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأسلاب شامك والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدن حماة ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الذكي الحادي المهدي وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وعلم الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسوله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن بشراع ديني وخواتيمي أمري وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم. ذات عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا ابن حسين الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها الشهيد وابن الشهيد. السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم. لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرزيت به. زيارة الشهداء كربلاء. السلام عليك يا أولياء الله وأحباء. السلام عليك يا أصفياء الله وأعزاء. السلام عليك يا أنصار دين الله. السلام عليك يا أنصار رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناس. السلام عليك يا أنصار أبي عبد الله. بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتعبت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما. فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم. زيارة أبو الفضل العباس. السلام عليك يا أبو الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها العبد الصالح المتو لله ورسوله. السلام عليك قد جاهدت ونصحت وصبرت حتى أتاك اليقين. لعن الله لكم من الأولين والآخرين والحقيكم بدرجك الجحيم. السلام عليك يا غريب الغربة السلطان أبو الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان ألمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل مخرجك وظهورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله يفرج. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Before we finish, can we all recite أمن يجيب الفوتات please? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. 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 صلوات. اللهم صل على